And I wasn't sent here to safeguard and protect profit. I was sent here to safeguard and protect people.
During a House Financial Services Committee hearing, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez broke down how devastating private equity firms are. So before I get to the clip, I just want to give you a little primer here on what private equity is. So as GQ writes, the quick and dirty explanation of private equity is that these are firms that buy other businesses. They restructure acquired companies in order to increase short-term profits or otherwise make them look more appealing to a buyer and then sell them for a profit. While that means a nice chunk of cash for the investors who made the sale, it can be a chaotic and disastrous process for the employees of the companies being bought and sold, and they might get laid off or see their company broken up and sold out from under them. So an example of a private equity firm is Bain Capital. So Mitt Romney's company, if you remember, that was a huge issue during the 2012 election, that Mitt Romney was a founder of Bain Capital, one of these companies that do this. And actually, we're going to get into a story about Toys R Us after the clip that I'm going to give you a little more detail on one example of what Bain Capital has been a part of. But watch here what AOC says. So it is so rare to see Congress people actually stand up for the average person over, the profits of massive corporations. So watch here how AOC just devastates private equity firms.
Because the first question that I hear from so many members are, how are the returns? But the returns are great, aren't they? How are the returns? And I wasn't sent here to safeguard and protect profit. I was sent here to safeguard and protect people. And we're talking about reining in private equity, which is responsible for wiping out tens of thousands of jobs at Toys R Us alone. And then we're hearing, but what about the companies that made 100 jobs here or 200 jobs there? Toys R Us, 30,000 jobs wiped out. Shopko, 14,000 jobs. Brookstone, David's Bridal, Payless. Not to mention the impacts, the undemocratic impacts on media companies. Splinter, Deadspin, Sports Illustrated, local and regional newspapers. In the last 10 years, private equity is behind 597,000 lost jobs. And it's not just about the number of jobs. Isn't that right, Ms. De La Rosa? It's about the quality of jobs, right? When private equity took over Toys R Us, did you see folks' work schedules get cut back?
Yes, definitely.
Did you see people's benefits in some other ways cut back?
Yes.
All right. So, that was fantastic. But this is also the kind of thing we just now come to expect from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When she's in these hearings, she actually stands up for people. She fights back against these, in this case, private equity firms making money off of people where they just cut their jobs. So, the entire purpose of private equity is to make lots of money in the short term for very few people. And in the process of doing that, layoffs, destroying thousands of lives, laying off the people that work at these companies that they acquired. So to give you an example of that, Toys R Us was brought up. So Toys R Us was a focus in this hearing as well. Toys R Us in 2004, three firms bought this company. So Vornado, a real estate investment firm, KKR, and Bain Capital, private equity firms. They paid $6.6 billion to buy Toys R Us, but they only needed to front 20% of that, meaning that Toys R Us, the company that they now own, is now saddled with the remaining debt. So with Toys R Us now saddled with this debt, stuck paying this off, they had to pay their interest payments were between $425 to $517 million a year. So even though Toys R Us was profitable, they weren't profitable enough to be able to make that up, because that is an insane amount of money to pay in interest payments. So they ended up, of course, going bankrupt, closing 900 stores, laying off 30,000 people. And now you may wonder, okay, but how did these private equity firms, how did they benefit from this? Check this out. Vornado, KKR, and Bain didn't walk away empty-handed, according to Giovanni De La Rosa, a former Toys R Us employee, who was testifying Tuesday. Quote, "My coworkers and I were left with nothing," she told the legislators, while Toys R Us paid $470 million in fees to private equity owners. That'd be enough to pay over $14,000 in severance to each employee who lost their job. So, to be exact here, those private equity firms made $464 million in fees and interest from Toys R Us during the period that they owned the company. So essentially, they cannibalized Toys R Us, destroyed 30,000 lives for personal financial gain. This is what private equity does. And I also want to give a shout out here to actually the GQ article I just read from. There's a great piece, or that's a great piece from Luke Darby. He has more examples than just Toys R Us in that piece as well that break down what private equity has done to people's lives. But just moving on here a little bit. From this clip, you may think, oh, well, AOC is just part of, other Democrats who are also saying the same thing on the same case, pushing out the idea that, private equity is destroying all these lives. No. In fact, it appears AOC was the only person in this committee actually making this case. So this from Politico. The sympathetic attitude towards private equity from one member after another on the Democratic side of the aisle, including those who continue to accept campaign contributions from the industry, illustrated the widening gulf of views in the party about economic policy before the 2020 election. Representative Gregory Meeks, a Democrat of New York, said he was actually trying to attract private equity dollars to a minority-owned company at risk of failing. Representative Brad Sherman, Democrat from California, said he was not, quote, not hostile to private equity, and that the industry was being attacked for, quote, doing things that are done elsewhere in our economy. Representative Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat from New Jersey, highlighted investment returns of private equity funds that beat the stock market. So while you have AOC here actually standing up for people over profit, you have the other Democrats in this hearing defending private equity firms. And it just so happens these Democrats are also taking campaign contributions from private equity, highlighting again how much of an impact money and greed have on the system. So also credit here for Politico actually reporting this and mentioning the campaign contributions from private equity clearly would have an impact here, clearly helps to shape policy. I mean, when you have this much money, this much private money poured into politics, these companies don't just do it for fun. They do it because they get a return on their investment. And this is just another example of that. So when you have AOC, a politician who takes no corporate money, holds no private fundraisers, no corporate PACs, doesn't meet with wealthy donors, only relies on individual contributions from real people, this is what you get in a politician. When you have a politician uncorrupted, you actually get somebody fighting for you. So just total credit here to AOC for actually standing up for people in this hearing, despite the fact that other Democrats in that hearing were standing up for private interests as they normally do.